During the mid-1945s summer period, the United States Navy possessed 563 destroyer escorts, representing the largest single warship category ever constructed by any individual nation. These vessels, produced with remarkable speed across multiple American shipyards between 1943 and 1925, currently occupied ports ranging from Norfolk to San Diego, from Pearl Harbor to Philippine territories. Every ship measured 306 feet, displaced approximately 1,400 tons, and had been designed for one specific purpose: locating and eliminating submarines across Atlantic and Pacific theaters. After Germany's defeat in May and Japan's capitulation in August, this purpose had vanished immediately. Naval planners faced an immediate and practical challenge. What should be done with 563 warships that had suddenly become obsolete? This situation was unprecedented in naval military history. No fleet had previously experienced such a rapid transition from total warfare to peacetime circumstances. These destroyer escorts, commonly identified as DEs, had cost approximately $6 million each to construct, representing a combined investment surpassing $3 billion. They consumed fuel, required crews totaling 186 personnel per vessel, needed constant maintenance, and occupied valuable berth space at naval facilities worldwide. The Navy's Bureau of Ships began calculating the costs of simply maintaining this enormous fleet in reserve condition, approximately $850 million annually. With military budgets declining and Congress demanding demobilization, keeping every destroyer escort in active condition was financially impossible. However, these were modern warships, averaging less than 3 years old, with potentially decades of service life remaining. The destroyer escort program had been America's answer to the U-boat crisis of 1942 and 1943. Designed to be simpler and cheaper than fleet destroyers, DEs could be built in volume using prefabrication techniques and diesel or turboelectric engines that didn't compete with the steam turbines needed for larger warships. The results had been remarkable. American shipyards manufactured destroyer escorts faster than any other warship type, with some vessels advancing from initial construction to combat duty in less than 6 months. By the war's end, these ships had sunk 67 German U-boats and numerous Japanese submarines, while escorting thousands of convoy groups across both oceanic theaters. Their success made them valuable. Their numbers made them disposable. The Navy faced deciding which destroyer escorts deserved retention and which would face the scrapper's torch, a decision that would shape American naval strength for the next 25 years. The situation in late 1945 presented naval administrators with conflicting pressures. One viewpoint argued that the emerging Cold War suggested submarine threats had not vanished, but merely changed sides. Soviet submarine construction was accelerating, and the Red Navy had captured numerous German U-boats along with their advanced technology. Meanwhile, the American public demanded rapid demobilization. Congress cut naval appropriations by 75%, and shipyards that had built destroyer escorts now needed conversion to civilian manufacturing. The Navy faced an immediate decision: which DEs would remain in active service, which would enter reserve, and which would be scrapped or sold. The destroyer escort fleet itself showed considerable variety despite its apparent uniformity. 6 different classes had been built, each possessing different propulsion systems, armament configurations, and operational characteristics. The Avarts class numbered 97 ships with diesel-electric engines. The Buckley class, containing 154 examples, used turbo-electric propulsion. The Cannon class numbered 72 with diesel-electric engines. The Edsall class included 85 ships with diesel power plants. The Rudderrow class contained 72 vessels. The John C. Butler class, the most advanced, numbered 83 ships with steam turbine propulsion providing greater speed. This diversity complicated retention choices, as maintaining 6 different machinery types would prove expensive. By December 1945, the Navy had formulated its initial approach. Approximately 100 destroyer escorts would remain in active commission, distributed between Atlantic and Pacific fleets. Another 200 would enter the reserve fleet, properly maintained and serviced for potential reactivation. The remaining 263 vessels faced disposal through scrapping, transfer to Allied nations, or conversion to other purposes. This decision reflected both strategic thinking and financial realities. The Navy recognized that future conflicts might require convoy escorts, but maintaining 563 active vessels was economically unfeasible. The evaluation process began immediately, with naval engineers and tactical planners examining each vessel's condition, capabilities, and potential utility. The American approach toward its surplus destroyer escorts differed dramatically from how other Allied powers handled captured Axis equipment. The United States owned these ships outright, granting complete discretion to dispose of them as wished. No Allied oversight committee mandated destruction, no international agreement restricted numbers, and no rival nation competed to obtain them. Instead, the Navy faced a purely internal debate about balancing capability retention with cost reduction. This domestic focus would produce outcomes quite different from what happened to captured German or Japanese naval craft. The destroyer escorts selected for continued active service represented the newest and most capable examples. The Navy prioritized the John C. Butler class and later Rudderrow class vessels, which offered superior performance and most modern equipment. By mid-1946, approximately 87 destroyer escorts remained commissioned, serving mainly with Atlantic Fleet anti-submarine warfare groups. These vessels conducted routine patrols, training exercises, and goodwill visits to foreign ports. Their crews, now volunteers rather than wartime draftees, maintained the ships to peacetime standards while naval planners debated their long-term fate. The Reserve Fleet program absorbed 203 destroyer escorts between 1946 and 1948. These vessels were systematically prepared for long-term storage at facilities in Norfolk, Charleston, Orange, and San Diego. The preservation process was thorough. All machinery was drained, cleaned, and coated with preservatives. Electronics were removed and stored in climate-controlled warehouses. Weapons were preserved and sealed. Hulls were cleaned, painted, and inspected. The goal was keeping these ships ready for reactivation within 90 days, if needed. The Navy called this the Mothball fleet, representing a significant commitment to retaining destroyer escort capability while reducing active numbers. The disposal of excess destroyer escorts proceeded along several parallel tracks. Scrapping accounted for the largest number, with 147 vessels sold to commercial demolition firms between 1946 and 1948. Most went to yards in New Jersey, Texas, and California, where they were systematically dismantled. The steel held significant value in the immediate post-war period as American industry converted to peacetime production. Each destroyer escort yielded approximately 800 tons of scrap steel, 15 tons of copper, and smaller quantities of brass, aluminum, and other metals. The demolition process was efficient but irreversible. These ships, many with less than 2 years of actual service, were reduced to raw materials within weeks of arriving at the breakers' yards. Foreign military transfers provided destinations for 79 American destroyer escorts between 1946 and 1952. This program served multiple purposes. It disposed of excess vessels, strengthened Allied navies, and maintained American influence in post-war maritime affairs. France received 13 destroyer escorts through the Mutual Defense Assistance Program, commissioning them between 1950 and 1952 to rebuild its navy after wartime losses. The Netherlands acquired 8 vessels, redesignating them as frigates and using them for colonial patrol in the East Indies. Brazil purchased 7 destroyer escorts, which formed the core of its anti-submarine force. Italy received 4 vessels, Greece obtained 6, and smaller numbers went to the Republic of China, Uruguay, and other nations. These transfers were carefully managed, with American technical teams training foreign crews and establishing maintenance procedures. The largest foreign transfer involved providing 18 destroyer escorts to Japan between 1953 and 1956. These vessels became the foundation of the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force, established following the 1951 Security Treaty. The destroyer escorts were redesignated as patrol frigates to comply with Japan's post-war constitution, which prohibited offensive military forces. Japanese crews received extensive training at American bases before taking delivery of their ships. This program proved politically sensitive, as it involved giving warships to the recently defeated enemy. But strategic logic prevailed. American planners recognized that Japan's geographic position made it critical for containing Soviet Pacific ambitions, and a capable Japanese navy served American interests. Conversion programs transformed 47 destroyer escorts into specialized vessels. The largest conversion created radar picket escorts, DER, which received advanced radar systems for early warning duties. 26 destroyer escorts underwent this conversion between 1949 and 1952. These conversions reflected changing naval priorities as threats shifted from submarines to aircraft and missiles. 12 destroyer escorts became high-speed transports, APD, between 1945 and 1946, fitting accommodations for 162 troops. These proved useful during the occupation of Japan and the Korean. 5 destroyer escorts became experimental platforms for testing new technologies. The outbreak of the Korean War in June 1950 halted the Navy's disposal plans. The Navy needed every available escort for convoy protection, amphibious support, and blockade duties. Between July 1950 and December 1951, the Navy recommissioned 39 destroyer escorts from reserve. These ships returned to operational status with remarkable speed, most becoming seaworthy within 90 days. The recommissioned destroyer escorts served primarily in the Pacific, escorting supply convoys, providing gunfire support, and conducting coastal patrol. The reactivations demonstrated both the value and limitations of the destroyer escort design. These ships performed well in confined waters around Korea, where their maneuverability proved advantageous. However, they were slow compared to newer destroyers. Their anti-aircraft armament was inadequate against jet aircraft, and their habitability fell below peacetime standards. Naval planners realized that while destroyer escorts remained useful for certain missions, they represented increasingly outdated technology, requiring eventual replacement. The post-Korea period saw continued reduction of the destroyer escort fleet through scrapping, transfers, and conversion. Between 1953 and 1957, an additional 73 destroyer escorts were sold for scrap as the Navy reduced its force. The reserve fleet shrank, with some vessels deteriorating beyond economical repair. By 1960, only 62 destroyer escorts remained in active American service, down from 87 operational in 1946. The reserve fleet held another 94 vessels, though many were considered unlikely reactivation candidates. The Soviet submarine threat of the late 1950s prompted one last major modernization effort. The Navy selected 35 destroyer escorts for upgrade through the Fleet Rehabilitation and Modernization Program, FREM. These ships received updated sonar, improved anti-submarine weapons including the ASROC rocket system, and better communications. The FRAM conversions occurred between 1960 and 1962 at Charleston, Long Beach, and Philadelphia. The modernized destroyer escorts gained another decade of service, with most remaining operational through the early 1970s. The final years of destroyer escort service extended into the mid-1970s. The last vessels in American service, mostly FRAM-modernized John C. Butler and Rudderow-class ships, were decommissioned between 1972 and 1974. These decommissionings happened quietly with little ceremony, as the Navy focused on newer frigate designs, incorporating gas turbine propulsion, guided missiles, and helicopter facilities. The destroyer escort had served for 3 decades, considerably longer than originally expected, but technological progress had rendered them obsolete beyond upgrade. Foreign service extended destroyer escort careers well beyond American retirement. French ships remained operational through 1976, Netherlands vessels through 1967, and Brazilian examples through 1989. The longest service went to destroyer escorts transferred to the Republic of China, with some remaining in the Taiwanese fleet through 1999. These foreign careers meant that destroyer escorts built in 1943 and 1944 served for over half a century. Preservation of destroyer escorts for museum display proved remarkably limited given their numbers. Of the original 563 vessels, only 2 exist today. The USS Slater, a Cannon-class destroyer escort, is preserved in Albany, New York, after service with the Greek Navy from 1951 through 1991. The ship was reacquired by American preservationists in 1993, transported back across the Atlantic, and restored. The scarcity of surviving destroyer escorts reflects several factors. Unlike larger warships, they generated little public interest as museum candidates. Standing today before the USS Slater in Albany, one confronts the mathematical reality. 563 vessels reduced to a single survivor, representing a disposal rate of 99.8%. This near-total disappearance occurred not through combat losses, which claimed relatively few destroyer escorts during the war, but through the economics of post-war defense budgets and technological obsolescence. The destroyer escorts that hunted U-boats across the Atlantic and guarded convoys throughout the Pacific simply became more expensive to maintain than they were worth to keep.